Welcome to Scary Stories. This is part 2 of a collection of 2023 domestic dogman problem stories. These were sent to us by people claiming dogmen or werewolves were interfering with their life in some manner. In fact, we're going to start this off with another story about people seeing dogmen in their own backyard. It might have a similar title, but I assure you this is a quite different story, and we're calling it Another Dogman in Another Backyard. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I must confess I am not sure where to begin with this tale. It was so utterly bizarre, so completely outlandish, that I'm still not certain if it was real or just a feverish hallucination of myself and my partner. But I can tell you this, I'm never going to look at my own backyard the same way again. It all started on a warm summer evening. I was sitting on the patio with my partner enjoying a glass of Merlot and the last of the daylight. We were chatting and laughing, completely oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold. Suddenly my partner Trevor stopped talking and let out a low gasp. He was staring over my shoulder, his eyes wide with surprise, and perhaps something else. I turned around, and I saw what he was looking at. In the middle of our backyard, standing perfectly still, was the most terrifying creature I had ever seen. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall, with the muscular build of a weightlifting gorilla, as if such a thing could exist. Now, I don't go for that steroid look. I'm not really into muscles. I find big guys threatening. But it wasn't a gorilla, nor was it a man either. It had the head of a wolf, with sharp teeth and piercing, glowing yellow devil eyes. I froze in terror. My partner Trevor, however, seemed to have a different reaction. He stood up and started walking toward the beast. I gasped in utter shock at his behavior. "Hey there, big fella," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "What's your name?" The werewolf didn't respond. It just stared at my partner with its unthinking animal eyes. "Come on," my partner said, "don't be shy. We're not gonna hurt you." "Good Lord, Trevor," I shouted, "tell him we have a gun. Frighten the beast away, don't invite him in." But naughty Trevor ignored me, and he took another step closer to the most overly muscled man I'd ever seen. Or not a man, but you know what I mean. The werewolf growled, a low rumbling sound that sent a chill down my spine, but only seemed to annoy Trevor. "I said we're not gonna hurt you," my partner repeated, his voice firmer this time. "We'll just come over here and say hello." The werewolf hesitated for a moment. Then he actually obeyed my silly guy and started walking toward my partner Trevor. I couldn't believe it. Was Trevor actually going to try to pet this thing? What were his intentions toward this large cryptid anyway? The dogman stopped in front of my partner and sniffed him, curiously, which caused Trevor to erupt in girlish giggles. Then it reached out its massive paw and touched my partner's arm. My partner smiled and stroked the werewolf's fur. "Who's a good boy?" asked Trevor. "You're a good boy," he answered himself. I watched in disbelief as my partner bonded with a North American upright canid or dogman. It was like they were old friends, or maybe even something more. But then in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The werewolf suddenly snarled and snapped at my partner's arm. Trevor jerked back, startled. The werewolf lunged at him, its dinosaur monster teeth bared, and the smell of rotted meat filling our backyard. I screamed in terror. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen with fear. Or really, I was jumping up and down in place and whooping it up loudly. I mean, this was a terrible development, and I was quite frantic about expressing my discomfort. But my partner Trevor was quick thinking, for a change. He turned and ran toward the house, which really was a brilliant decision. If I could have remained calmer, that's perhaps what I might have done as well. Trevor reached the back door and fumbled with the keys, as I ran desperately after him. The werewolf was getting closer, but he seemed in no rush about chasing us. In spite of Trevor's affectionate behavior, the monster man seemed to want to corral us back into our house. I could hear its heavy paws pounding on the ground behind me as it snarled and whined at us in a threatening manner. Then finally the door opened, and we slipped back inside. Trevor slammed the door shut and locked it, then collapsed into my arms, weeping and sobbing uncontrollably. He was apologizing for putting both our lives at risk, but he said he was risking it all for love. As unhappy as I was with Trevor, I reassured him, and I told him that it was okay. The foolish boy had made a mistake, but he was erring on the side of love, and I can't blame a man for that. He must have seen those huge pectoral muscles, and all concept that this wasn't actually a human flew out of our Trevor's ears. I had to forgive him. I can be just as impetuous in my own way. The dogman began crashing into the door to frighten us, but it held firm. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath. Then Trevor turned to me and said, "I think we should get out of here." I nodded in agreement, but I had no idea where we should go. I found myself too frightened to think clearly. We quickly gathered our things and ran out the front door, with that muscular beast man out back. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of our car. First, we locked the doors and rolled up the windows. Then, we sat there in silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I had thought Trevor planned on driving away, but it seemed his plan was to sit in the car and stare back at the house. I looked back at our house as well, along with Trevor. The werewolf was nowhere to be seen, but I knew it was still out there somewhere, lurking in the shadows. After a while, I suggested some places we could get a nice dinner, and Trevor drove me to one of our favorite bistros. In the days that followed, we couldn't stop thinking about what we had seen. We talked about it endlessly, trying to make sense of it, but there was no obvious explanation presenting itself. It was as if the werewolf had simply appeared out of thin air. We started to do some research on werewolves and dogmen. We read all the books and articles we could find, but nothing we read really could explain what we had seen. The dogman we had seen was different from any werewolf described in folklore or legend. It was bigger, it was stronger, and more ferocious, and it was definitely not afraid of humans. We started to wonder if we were the only ones who had seen this muscle-bound werewolf. We talked to our neighbors, but they hadn't seen it. It was as if we were the only ones who were aware of its existence. And then we found your channel, with the stories of the Giga Chad Dogman, who is so absurdly over-muscular. Now we have a name for what we saw, and a new favorite scary YouTube channel. We live in an eastern suburb of Pittsburgh, and I'm telling you, the Pennsylvania werewolf is not only real, but honey, he is swole. A dogman was living in my attic for weeks. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a wife who loves paranormal TV shows, and so when we experienced bumping up in our attic, she jumped to the conclusion that we had a ghost up there. For this reason, she kept me from going up there and looking around for weeks, and the situation got worse. Because you see, we didn't have a ghost up there at all. We had a dogman, bringing his nightly kills into our attic so he could dine in peace. I'll tell you the story of how we eventually found out about it. Okay, so my wife is big and brave about a lot of things, but bumps in the night is not on that list. So when she woke me up so that I could hear the bumping and thumping going on upstairs, I had no problem jumping out of bed and heading over to the attic entrance. Only my wife Deirdre stopped me. She told me I couldn't go up there because I was not an official paranormal investigator. I asked her why she got me up if she didn't want me to do anything about it, and we both started arguing. So, days stretched into weeks, and I wasn't allowed up in my own attic because my wife was trying to get a local Michigan paranormal team to come out to investigate. She started by asking the more famous ones, and they recommended less famous ones to her. Then negotiations began with several different teams, and as it dragged on, we weren't getting much sleep. I started taking naps at my job, which was embarrassing, and everyone thought my wife and I were breaking up or something. When I told them it was because my wife thought we had a ghost, they were like, "Oh, sure, a ghost." I couldn't wait for Deirdre to get someone out there, so I could find out if it was a raccoon or what it was. I really didn't think it was a ghost. I didn't hear chains rattling or moaning from up there, and all the sounds I did hear could have been made by an animal of some sort. I wanted to go have a look, then call out some expert to remove the animal or animals. Now my wife, on the other hand, was researching all the former owners of this house to find out which spirit was haunting us. She said there was no way it was an ordinary animal, and I said there was no way it was a ghost. I suppose we were both a little bit right. So the night came when the ghost hunting team showed up in their van with their cameras and computers, and they started moving equipment into the house. While I was standing out front watching their procedures, my neighbor came over to see what all the fuss was about. When I told him, he informed me that he could actually see a hole in my attic from his second-story bedroom window. He said he kept forgetting to tell me about it, and he was sort of afraid to bring it up because he didn't want to be rude. He was kind of surprised that I didn't know about it, so I told him how my wife hadn't allowed me up in the attic for over a month. The leader of the ghost hunting crew was very interested in this conversation, and he asked if he could go have a look out of that neighbor's window. I went with them, and soon the three of us found ourselves looking over at a hole big enough for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to walk through comfortably. It was a miracle the roof on that side of the house hadn't caved in already. It took me a few minutes to pull my jaw up off the ground, while the ghost hunter guy informed me that I had an infestation of some kind of an animal, but not a ghost. We went downstairs and he told his people to pack the van back up, and that the hunt was called off. My wife was extremely unhappy about this, and she was running around on our lawn shouting at everybody. The team leader, our neighbor Jim, and myself all told her exactly what I just told you, but it didn't calm her down in the slightest. She demanded the ghost hunt go on, but the leader told her that the hole he had seen in our roof was quite large, and he didn't know what kind of an animal was up there, since he didn't have insurance for his team covering animal attacks. It wasn't safe or logical for him to keep his team in our home. He was making sense to everyone but my enraged wife Deirdre, who was now saying she was gonna go to the attic and do her own investigation. So our neighbor Jim and I went up to the attic with her, since she was only gonna get herself bitten by something if we didn't. To get to our attic, you have to climb these narrow stairs, then climb through a doorway that's actually smaller than the hole I saw in our roof. I'm not sure Kareem could fit through this hole, but none of us had to even try to squeeze in there that night, since as soon as I unlocked the door, a very large dog burst out along with the most sickening smell of death that I have ever experienced. And that surprise combination sent the three of us tumbling back down that staircase, banging every single part of our bodies into every single other part, and the walls, and the stairs, and the ceiling. And when we finished our painful fall and looked back up, we saw that this dog that was snarling at us and trying to get through toward us was too big to fit through that doorway. I was just kidding about Kareem before. A large man would need to be extremely overweight not to fit through this doorway, although you will have to crawl through for certain. Well, this dog couldn't crawl through, and it had the strangest looking front leg and paw. It was reaching one front leg through, trying to pull itself into the stairway, then pulling that leg back and putting the other one through instead. Honestly, they looked more like arms than the front legs of a dog, and his paws were an awful lot like hands with sharp claws. This dog wasn't just big, it was strange looking. So maybe he was some kind of a wolf that I just hadn't heard of. Maybe it was an extra large kind of a coyote, I wouldn't know. I don't think it was ever anyone's pet, as it looked at us like we were food. There was no compassion in those eyes. There was only bloodlust. And rather than even trying to go up there and close that door again, we padlocked the door to the staircase and moved a heavy bookcase in front of that door. As soon as I could, I had animal removal people come out, but the dog was not here when they arrived. We went up there and saw the mess the creature had left, and for your sake, I'm not even going to describe it to you. I already told you what that canine had been using our attic for. I hired the neighbor's kid to help me clean that up, and I'm not even going to tell you how much it cost to have some guys come out and do emergency repairs on our roof. I mean, the dogman is one level of scary, and the price of those repairs, that was scary on a much higher level. So now we know about the dogman, and I listen to some of the shows on your channel sometimes. You know, at the end where people say stuff about how they've learned not to enter those woods, or they learned not to camp alone or whatever? Well, the lesson I learned from all this is that the next time my wife thinks she's hearing a ghost in a part of our house, I'm going to go investigate that part of the house immediately. I am never waiting a month to find out what is going bump in the night. Ever again. Werewolf in the basement. Dear Scary Stories NYC, we had been living in our modest country home for 10 years and owned it outright for the past 3, before my wife woke me up one night to tell me about the thumping in the basement. Half asleep, I stumbled out of bed and down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the basement door, I could hear the thumping more clearly. It was a deep, heavy sound, like someone was hitting the floor with a large object. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The basement was dark, but I could make out the outline of a large figure in the corner. It was hunched over, its back to me. As I got closer, I could see that it was covered in thick brown fur. It was huge, easily over 7 feet tall. I took another step closer and the creature turned to face me. It had the head of a bear, but with more canine ears. Its eyes were glowing golden. It had long, sharp claws. I froze in terror because this was something even scarier than a bear. I had never seen anything quite like it before. The creature stared at me for a long moment, then turned and lumbered back into the corner. It sat down and resumed its thumping. I stood there for a few more seconds, my mind racing. What was this thing? What was it doing in my basement? And how was I going to get it to leave? I knew I couldn't just leave it there. It was too dangerous. But I also knew that I couldn't fight it. It was too big and too strong. I decided that I needed to come up with a plan. I backed out of the basement and closed the door behind me. I went back upstairs and I woke up my wife. I told her what I'd seen, and she was just as horrified as I was. We spent the rest of the night brainstorming ideas on how to get the creature out of the basement. We considered everything from calling the police to trying to trap it and release it into the woods. Finally, we decided on a plan. We would try to lure the creature out of the basement with food. We gathered up some scraps of meat and cheese from the kitchen, and I went back downstairs. I opened the door to the basement and I called out to the creature. "Here, boy," I said, "come and get it." And then I tossed the food to the bottom of the staircase. The creature looked up to me, then got to its feet and started walking toward me. I slowly backed away, getting ready to run if I needed to. The creature reached the food and started to eat, tearing the meat with its sharp teeth and claws. Once it had finished eating, the creature looked up at me again. It seemed to be considering something. Then it turned and walked back into the corner. It sat down and resumed its thumping. I was disappointed. I thought that maybe it would follow me out of the basement, but I guess I was wrong. I closed the basement door and went back upstairs. I told my wife what had happened, and we decided to wait until the morning to try again. The next morning, I went back downstairs to the basement. I opened the door and called out to the creature, but there was no answer. I stepped inside and looked around. The creature was gone. I was relieved, but also confused. Where had it gone to? Why had it left so suddenly? I mean, I suspect it was a dogman, but I never really found out what the creature was or where it came from. I do know its movements were surprisingly graceful for such a large and powerful thing. When it looked at me, I felt like it could see right into my soul. I still have nightmares about that creature sometimes. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I can see its golden glowing eyes, and I can hear its deep rumbling growl. I know that it's gone, but I can't help but feel that that bear-like dogman is still out there somewhere, waiting for me. We couldn't live without them, I suppose. I'm talking about S.A. Rose. Please join me in thanking S.A. Rose, one of our top-tier PayPal Club members. S.A. Rose gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman and Werewolf stories, of which we put out 4 each month for members only. You can become a PayPal Club member at peoperty.com or a channel member right here on YouTube by clicking the join button. If you missed yesterday's show, we've got this cool new life-size Dogman shower curtain that we're selling at the link in the description. I'm trying to tag the videos with the item, but it doesn't always work. In either case, the link is in the description if you'd like to make your bathroom a little bit scarier. A lot bit scarier. And speaking of scary, here comes our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank?
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peoperty.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.